The early morning sun peeked through the tall glass windows of Central City Station, casting long shadows across the marble floor. The place buzzed with people rushing to work, coffee cups in hand, eyes glued to phones. Nobody noticed the elderly woman sitting quietly on a wooden bench near the east entrance, her weathered hands resting on a small suitcase. Rose Thompson was 87 years old, though the lines on her face suggested someone who had lived through more than just years. Beside her sat a little girl of about 7, with bright eyes that still held wonder despite everything they had seen. This was Penny, Rose's granddaughter, the only family she had left in the world. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" Rose asked, reaching into her bag for a slightly squashed sandwich wrapped in paper. Penny nodded, accepting the sandwich with both hands. "Thank you, Grandma," she said softly, taking a small bite, though Rose could tell she wanted to devour it all at once. 3 months ago, they had lived in a small apartment on Oak Street. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom place with faded wallpaper and creaky floors, but it had been home. Rose had managed to raise her granddaughter there after Penny's mother, Rose's daughter, had passed away from cancer 2 years earlier. They had gotten by on Rose's small pension and the money she made giving piano lessons to neighborhood children. Then Rose fell down the stairs. The hospital bills came. The rent went unpaid. Letters piled up with red stamps declaring final notice in angry letters. Rose had tried everything, calling old friends, applying for assistance, even selling her wedding ring. But at 87, the world had a way of forgetting you existed. "We'll find somewhere nice today," Rose promised, though they both knew the shelters would likely be full again. They had spent the last 2 nights sleeping on this very bench when the women's shelter had turned them away. The security guard, a kind-faced man named Tom, had pretended not to see them. Penny finished her sandwich and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Can we watch the trains again today?" Rose nodded, grateful for the simple request. "Of course we can, and maybe later we can walk to the library. Would you like that?" The station grew busier as morning stretched on. Business people with expensive coats and briefcases, tourists with maps and confused expressions, students with heavy backpacks, all moving with purpose, all having somewhere to go. Rose and Penny simply watched, invisible to most. Around noon, the crowd thinned a little. Penny tugged at her grandmother's sleeve. "Can we walk around?" "My legs feel funny," Rose understood. Sitting too long made her own legs cramp terribly. "Let's take a little stroll around the station," she agreed, standing slowly and wincing at the pain in her joints. They walked hand in hand, keeping close to the walls to avoid getting in anyone's way. Rose had learned that when you're homeless, the best strategy is to be invisible, draw attention, and someone might decide you don't belong, might call security or worse. As they rounded a corner into the west wing of the station, Penny suddenly stopped. "Grandma, look!" Rose followed her granddaughter's pointing finger and saw it, a grand piano. It sat in an alcove near large windows, sunlight gleaming off its polished black surface. A small plaque on the side read, "Play Me, I'm Yours, donated by the City Arts Foundation." "It's beautiful," Penny whispered, approaching it slowly as if it might disappear. Rose felt a lump form in her throat. Before everything fell apart, before the hospital bills and the eviction, before she became an old woman with nowhere to go, Rose Thompson had been a piano teacher for over 60 years. She had played at weddings and concerts, had taught hundreds of children, had once even performed with the city orchestra. "Did you used to have a piano like this, Grandma?" Penny asked, carefully touching one white key with the tip of her finger. A clear note rang out, making a few passers-by glance over. "Not quite as grand," Rose said, moving closer. "But yes, I had a piano most of my life. It was my mother's before me." Penny looked up, surprise brightening her tired face. "You never told me that." Rose smiled sadly. "There's a lot I haven't told you about the old days." The piano had been sold months ago along with most of their possessions. Just one more loss in a string of many. "Can you play it?" Penny asked, her voice dropping to an excited whisper. Rose glanced around nervously. Would someone chase them away? Would they assume 2 shabby-looking people shouldn't touch something so beautiful? But no one seemed to be paying attention to the old woman and the little girl. "I used to play quite well," Rose admitted, "but my fingers aren't what they used to be. Arthritis, you know." She held up her hands, showing the swollen knuckles and bent fingers. "Just one song," Penny pleaded. "Please, Grandma." How could Rose say no to those eyes? With a deep breath, she carefully lowered herself onto the piano bench, feeling the familiar comfort of sitting before a keyboard again. It had been months since she'd played, since the day men came to take her old upright piano away. Penny climbed up beside her, watching with wide eyes. Rose placed her stiff hands on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. For a moment she hesitated, suddenly afraid. What if she couldn't do it anymore? What if this one last piece of her old self was gone too? "It's okay," Penny whispered, leaning against her grandmother's arm. "Nobody's listening anyway." Rose nodded, took a deep breath, and began to play. She chose Beethoven's Für Elise, one of the first pieces she had learned as a child. Her fingers moved slowly at first, finding their way back to a path they had traveled thousands of times before. The notes weren't perfect. Her stiff joints couldn't move as quickly as the piece demanded. But the melody was clear and sweet. As she played, something strange happened. The constant pain in her hands seemed to fade. The worry about where they would sleep that night retreated to some distant corner of her mind. For those few minutes, she wasn't an 87-year-old homeless woman. She was just Rose, the pianist. Penny sat transfixed, watching her grandmother's transformation with wonder. She had never seen her grandmother like this before. Eyes closed, a small smile playing on her lips, swaying gently with the music. Rose didn't notice when people began to stop and listen. A businessman checking his watch paused mid-step. A young woman removed her earphones. A station cleaner leaned on his broom. By the time Rose played the final notes, a small crowd had gathered around the piano. She opened her eyes, startled to find people watching. For a terrible moment, she feared they would be angry, would tell her the piano wasn't for people like her. Instead, there was a smattering of applause. "That was beautiful," said a woman in a red coat. "Are you a professional?" Rose felt her cheeks grow warm. "I was a long time ago." "Play another one, Grandma," Penny said excitedly. "Play your favorite." Before Rose could answer, a voice cut through the small gathering. "Excuse me." A station security guard approached, his face unreadable. Rose's heart sank. Here it came. They would be asked to leave, maybe even banned from the station altogether. "Are you two planning to stay here long?" the guard asked, his voice quiet enough that only Rose could hear. "We're just leaving," Rose said quickly, starting to stand. "I'm sorry if we disturbed anyone." The guard's expression softened unexpectedly. "No disturbance at all. It's just," he glanced at his watch, "my shift ends in 30 minutes. If you're still here, I can show you where the community center is. They have beds available tonight and they're not usually full up this time of month." Rose stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Thank you," she whispered, tears suddenly stinging her eyes. The guard nodded once before walking away. Penny tugged at her grandmother's sleeve again. "Can we stay and play more, Grandma, please?" Rose looked down at her granddaughter, then back at the piano. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope stirring in her chest. "Yes," she said, settling back onto the bench. "Let's play together. Would you like me to teach you?" Penny's face lit up like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Yes, please." And so, while travelers rushed past and the afternoon sun slanted through the high windows, an 87-year-old woman with nowhere to go began teaching her granddaughter how to play Twinkle. Twinkle, Little Star on a grand piano in the middle of Central City Station. Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple moment would change everything. The security guard's name was David, and true to his word, he helped Rose and Penny find the community center that evening. It wasn't much, just a converted church basement with cots lined up against the walls, but it was warm and safe. For the first time in days, they slept on real beds instead of hard benches. "Do you think we can go back to the piano tomorrow?" Penny asked as Rose tucked the thin blanket around her. "If you'd like to," Rose said, smoothing her granddaughter's hair. "But we should try to find something more permanent soon. We can't keep living like this." Penny nodded solemnly, her young face too serious for a child her age. "I know, Grandma, but I like the piano. And you smiled today?" "You haven't smiled in a long time." Rose felt a pang in her heart. Children noticed everything, even the things you tried to hide from them. She had been trying so hard to stay strong, to not let Penny see how scared she was. But of course the child had seen right through her. "Get some sleep now," Rose whispered, kissing Penny's forehead. "Tomorrow will be better." As Penny drifted off to sleep, Rose sat on the edge of her cot thinking about the piano. For those brief moments while playing, she had forgotten their troubles. Music had always been her escape, her comfort, her joy. Perhaps it could be again, even now. The next morning, after a simple breakfast provided by the community center, they made their way back to the train station. Rose felt almost silly for how excited she was to see that piano again. But when they turned the corner and the grand instrument came into view, her heart lifted. It was early, not yet 8 o'clock, and the station was quieter than it would be during rush hour. A perfect time for a lesson. Now then, Rose said, settling on the bench and patting the spot next to her. Let's begin properly. Every good pianist needs to know the basics. Penny climbed up eagerly, her feet dangling above the floor. I'm ready. Rose placed her granddaughter's small hands on the keys, showing her the proper position. These 5 keys are C, D, E, F, and G. We'll start with these. Now watch my fingers and try to copy what I do. Slowly, patiently, Rose began teaching Penny a simple exercise, the same one she had taught to hundreds of beginning students over the decades. Penny's tongue poked out between her teeth as she concentrated, pressing each key carefully. That's it, Rose encouraged. Nice and steady. Music isn't a race. They practiced for nearly an hour, Penny mastering the 5-note scale and even learning a simple tune. Rose marveled at how quickly the child picked things up. She had a natural ear, just like Rose's daughter had. As the station grew busier, a few people paused to watch them, smiling at the sight of the elderly woman teaching the little girl. One woman in a business suit stopped longer than the others. Excuse me, she said during a break in their practice. I couldn't help noticing your lesson. Are you a piano teacher? Rose hesitated, unsure how to answer. Would this woman report them for loitering if she knew they were homeless? I was, she admitted finally. For many years. The woman nodded, seemingly impressed. I can tell. You're very good with her. She glanced at her watch. I have to run, but I wanted to say it's nice to see the station piano being used properly. So many people just bang on it as they pass by. Rose smiled. Thank you. We're enjoying it very much. The woman hurried away, but her brief interaction left Rose feeling strangely validated. She had been someone once, a respected teacher, a musician. Perhaps parts of that person still existed. Even now. Around noon, David the security guard appeared again, this time in regular clothes instead of his uniform. I thought I might find you two here, he said, smiling. How's the lesson going? Grandma says I'm a natural, Penny announced proudly. She certainly is, Rose agreed. She has a good ear, David nodded, looking thoughtful. Listen, I know this might sound strange, but I had an idea last night. My sister works at the Sunshine Senior Living Center across town. They have a piano in their community room that nobody really uses. She mentioned they've been looking for someone to come in and play occasionally, maybe teach some of the residents who are interested. Rose stared at him, not quite understanding. Are you suggesting? It wouldn't be much, David said quickly. But they could offer a small stipend, and more importantly, they have a vacant resident assistant apartment. My sister says they've been trying to fill the position for months. It includes housing in exchange for about 15 hours of work per week, helping with activities, being on call for minor issues, that sort of thing. Rose's heart began to race. But I'm 87 years old, she protested. They wouldn't want someone my age, David shrugged. My sister seems to think your age is a plus. Most of the residents are in their 70s and 80s. They'd relate to you. And after hearing you play yesterday, he gestured to the piano. Well, she thinks you'd be perfect. Penny grabbed Rose's arm, her face alight with hope. Can we go see it, Grandma? Please, Rose felt overwhelmed. After months of doors closing in their faces, could one really be opening now? It seemed too good to be true. I don't know if I'm strong enough to do that kind of work anymore, she said hesitantly. It's not heavy lifting, David assured her. Mostly it's organizing card games, helping with the book club, that sort of thing. And they'd love having a pianist. Their last one moved to Florida 6 months ago. And we'd have a real place to live? Penny asked, her voice small but hopeful. David nodded. A small apartment in the building. Nothing fancy but clean and safe. Rose looked down at her granddaughter's hopeful face, then at her own gnarled hands. Could she really do this? Start over at her age? But what choice did they have? We would be honored to visit, she said finally. Thank you for thinking of us, David smiled. Great, my sister's waiting for us. I can drive you over now if you'd like. 20 minutes later, they pulled up outside Sunshine Senior Living Center. It was a modest 3-story brick building with flower boxes in the windows and a small garden out front. Nothing luxurious but welcoming. David's sister Beth met them at the entrance. She was a plump, cheerful woman with kind eyes that immediately put Rose at ease. "David told me all about you," Beth said, shaking Rose's hand warmly. "We're so excited to meet you. And this must be Penny. What a beautiful girl." Penny shyly hid behind her grandmother, peeking out with curious eyes. "Let me show you around," Beth continued. "We have about 40 residents here, most of them pretty independent. The apartment for the resident assistant is on the first floor, right next to the community room." As they walked through the building, Rose was struck by how homey it felt. Residents greeted them in the hallways, looking at Penny with delighted smiles. Many of them probably rarely saw children. The community room was large and bright, with comfortable furniture arranged in conversational groups. And there, in the corner by the windows, stood a well-maintained upright piano. Rose felt drawn to it immediately. Without thinking, she walked over and ran her fingers lightly across the keys. "Would you mind playing something for us?" Beth asked. A few residents are already gathering for afternoon tea. Rose glanced around and saw several elderly people watching with interest from doorways and chairs. She felt suddenly nervous. It had been a long time since she'd performed for an actual audience. "Go on, Grandma," Penny encouraged, squeezing her hand. "Play the pretty song from yesterday." Taking a deep breath, Rose sat down at the piano and began to play for Elise once again. Though her fingers were stiff, the music flowed more easily than it had the day before. As she played, residents drifted into the room, drawn by the music. Some closed their eyes, swaying slightly to the familiar melody. Others watched with evident pleasure. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, then enthusiastic applause. "That was wonderful," said an elderly man with a cane. "No one's played for us in months. Are you moving in?" Rose looked at Beth questioningly. "We hope so," Beth said. "Mrs. Thompson is considering becoming our new resident assistant." A murmur of approval went through the small crowd. A woman with silver hair stepped forward. "Do you K the first week at Sunshine Senior Living Center passed in a blur?" Rose and Penny moved into their small apartment with nothing but their suitcase of meager belongings. But that quickly changed. Residents and staff dropped by with little housewarming gifts, a colorful throw blanket, a set of mismatched dishes, a small vase with fresh flowers. Mrs. Wilson, from apartment 203, brought down a child-sized desk for Penny that her grandchildren had outgrown. Mr. Chen from the second floor donated a bookshelf he'd built in the center's woodworking shop. "I've never seen the residents take to someone so quickly," Beth told Rose on Friday afternoon as they shared a cup of tea in the community room. "Especially Harriet. She rarely speaks to anyone, but I heard her asking Penny about school yesterday." "Everyone has been so kind," Rose said, still overwhelmed by the generosity. "I'm not sure what we've done to deserve it," Beth smiled. "You brought music back into the building. You wouldn't believe how much that means to people here." Rose glanced over at the piano, which she'd been playing every afternoon that week. Each day, more residents appeared for her informal concerts. Some requested old favorites, songs from their youth that brought tears to their eyes. Others simply sat and listened, eyes closed, tapping their fingers against armrests. "I need to figure out school for Penny soon," Rose said, changing the subject. "She's missed so much already." "I've been meaning to talk to you about that," Beth replied. "We have a volunteer who comes in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Nancy, she's a retired elementary school teacher. She's been tutoring some of the residents who never learned to read well. I bet she'd be happy to work with Penny until we can get her enrolled somewhere." Another door opening. Another unexpected kindness. Rose was still getting used to the feeling of having support again after months of struggling alone. The next morning, Saturday, Penny woke up early, bouncing with excitement. "Can we practice piano today, Grandma?"
Before breakfast?
Rose smiled at her granddaughter's enthusiasm. "Let's have some toast first, then we can practice as long as you'd like." The community room was empty at 7:30 a.m., most residents still asleep or getting ready for the day. Penny sat beside Rose on the piano bench, her legs swinging, unable to reach the floor. "Now remember what we practiced yesterday? The C major scale with both hands." Rose positioned Penny's small fingers on the keys. "Let's try it again, nice and slow." Penny's tongue poked out between her teeth as she concentrated, carefully playing the scale up and down. Her form wasn't perfect, but Rose was impressed by how quickly she was learning. Very good. Now let's work on the little melody we started. For the next hour, they practiced together, Rose patiently correcting Penny's finger positions and timing. The child had natural talent. She could already play a simplified version of Heart and Soul. After just a few days of lessons, they were so absorbed in their practice that they didn't notice the residents gathering in the doorway, watching silently with smiles on their faces. "Don't stop on our account," called Mrs. Baker, an 80-year-old former librarian. "We're enjoying the show." Rose turned, surprised to see about a dozen residents watching them. "I hope we didn't wake anyone." "Best alarm clock I've had in years," Mr. Thompson chuckled. He wasn't related to Rose, but they'd joked about sharing a last name when they first met. "The little one's got talent." Penny beamed at the praise. "Grandma's teaching me. She says I might be ready to play a real song for everyone next week." "We'll look forward to it," Mrs. Baker said warmly. "Now who's coming to breakfast?" "I hear they've made French toast." As the residents shuffled toward the dining room, Rose noticed one woman still lingering in the doorway. She was tall and elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Rose had seen her at several of the afternoon concerts but had never spoken to her. "Hello," Rose said, offering a friendly smile. "Would you like to join us for breakfast?" The woman hesitated, then stepped into the room. "I'm Dorothy," she said. "Apartment 315. Her voice was soft but clear, with a hint of what might have been a British accent many years ago. "I'm Rose, and this is my granddaughter Penny. We're still learning everyone's names." Dorothy nodded, her eyes drawn to the piano. "I heard you playing Chopin yesterday. The Nocturne in E-flat major." "That's right," Rose said, surprised by the specific reference. Most residents just requested That Pretty Night Song or the dreamy one. "I used to play," Dorothy said, her eyes still on the piano. "Many years ago." Rose immediately stood up. "Would you like to play now?" "We were just finishing our lesson." Dorothy shook her head quickly. "Oh no, I couldn't. It's been decades." "It's like riding a bicycle," Rose encouraged. "The body remembers." "Please play something," Penny added. "I want to hear." Dorothy hesitated, then slowly approached the piano. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat down on the bench. For a long moment, she just stared at the keys, not touching them. "Take your time," Rose said gently. Finally, Dorothy placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The notes were hesitant at first, a few wrong keys pressed, but then the melody emerged, Debussy's Clair de Lune. She played it differently than Rose would have, slower and with more pauses, but with a touching expressiveness that spoke of years of training. As Dorothy played, her posture changed. Her shoulders relaxed, her head lifted, and a subtle smile appeared on her face. Rose recognized the transformation. It was the same one she experienced when playing. The years seemed to fall away, and for a few minutes Dorothy wasn't an elderly resident of a senior center, but a musician lost in the beauty of what she was creating. When she finished, there was silence. Penny was the first to speak. "That was so pretty," she whispered, "like water sparkling in the moonlight." Dorothy blinked as if waking from a dream. "Thank you, child. That's exactly what Debussy was trying to evoke." "You play beautifully," Rose said sincerely. "Were you a professional?" A shadow passed over Dorothy's face. "Almost. I studied at the Royal Academy of Music in London. But then life happened. Marriage, children, moving to America." She trailed off, her fingers still resting lightly on the keys. "I haven't played in public since 1978. Would you consider playing again?" Rose asked. "Perhaps we could play together sometime." "A duet?" Dorothy looked startled by the suggestion. "I don't know if I could." "You just did," Penny pointed out with the simple logic of a child. That made Dorothy smile. "I suppose I did." She stood up from the bench. "Thank you for the invitation. I'll think about it." After Dorothy left for breakfast, Rose and Penny followed, both hungry after their morning practice. The dining room was buzzing with conversation, residents discussing plans for the day or sharing stories from their pasts. Rose was still getting used to having regular meals again, to not having to worry about where their next meal would come from. Beth appeared at their table as they were finishing, looking slightly frazzled. "Rose, I hate to ask on a Saturday, but our scheduled entertainment for this afternoon canceled. It's Mrs. Henderson's 90th birthday, and we promised her a special celebration. Is there any chance you might play for an hour or so?" Nothing formal, just some background music while we have cake. Of course, Rose agreed immediately. I'd be happy to. Can I help too? Penny asked eagerly. Beth looked thoughtful. Actually, some of the residents have been asking about you. Would you like to show them what you've learned on the piano? Just one song? Penny's eyes widened. Like a real performance? Only if you want to, Rose said quickly. There's no pressure. I want to, Penny declared. I'll play Heart and Soul. I've been practicing. Beth smiled. Perfect. The party starts at 2 p.m. in the community room. And thank you both. You're really saving the day. After breakfast, they returned to the piano for another hour of practice. Penny was determined to perfect her piece before the afternoon performance. Rose was touched by her granddaughter's dedication, remembering her own childhood excitement before her first recital. You're going to do wonderfully, Rose assured her as they took a break. Just remember, if you make a mistake, keep going. Most people won't even notice. As they were about to resume practicing, there was a knock at the open community room door. It was Dorothy, looking slightly uncertain. I was wondering, she said hesitantly, if that offer to play a duet was still open. Rose smiled warmly. Absolutely. Beth told me about the birthday party this afternoon. Perhaps we could play something together, if you think I won't embarrass myself too badly. I think that would be lovely, Rose said. Do you know Schubert's Fantasy in F minor? It's written for 4 hands. Dorothy's face lit up. I do. It was one of my favorites to play with my sister. Though it's been years. We have a few hours to practice, Rose said, moving over on the bench to make room. Penny, would you mind if Dorothy and I work on a piece together for a while? Penny shook her head, settling into a nearby armchair with a book Mrs. Baker had lent her. I need to rest my fingers anyway. For the next 2 hours, Rose and Dorothy worked through the Schubert piece. Their timing was off at first, and both women's fingers were stiffer than they would have liked, but gradually they found a rhythm together. There was something magical about playing with another skilled pianist after so long, like having a conversation without words. By the time the birthday party began, the community room was transformed with streamers and balloons. Mrs. Henderson sat in a place of honor, a paper crown on her white hair, beaming as residents and a few family members gathered around. Penny played first, her small fingers carefully picking out the melody of Heart and Soul. She made 2 small mistakes but recovered just as Rose had taught her. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, Mrs. Henderson clapping loudest of all. That was the prettiest birthday present I've gotten today, the birthday girl declared, making Penny glow with pride. Then Rose played alone for a while, offering a selection of gentle classics that served as perfect background music, while people enjoyed cake and conversation. The residents had grown used to her playing over the past week, but many still paused their conversations to listen, particularly during familiar favorites like Moonlight Sonata and Clair de Lune. Finally, Rose announced a special piece. My new friend Dorothy and I would like to play a duet, Schubert's Fantasy in F minor. A hush fell over the room as Dorothy joined Rose at the piano. Their 4 hands moved together across the keys, creating music far richer than either could have produced alone. Though not perfect, their performance had heart and soul, the emotion of the piece shining through any technical flaws. When they finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Mrs. Henderson dabbed at her cheeks with a tissue. In all my 90 years, she declared, I don't think I've heard anything more beautiful. Dorothy's cheeks flushed with pleasure. I'd forgotten how good it feels to play, she whispered to Rose. Thank you for pushing me. Later that evening, as Rose tucked Penny into bed in their small apartment, the child yawned sleepily. I like it here, Grandma. I like making people happy with music. Rose kissed her forehead, her heart full. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. For the first time in months, Rose didn't worry about tomorrow. They had a roof over their heads, food in their bellies, and music in their lives once more. It wasn't the life she had planned, but perhaps it was the life they needed. 3 weeks had passed since Rose and Penny moved into Sunshine Senior Living Center. September had given way to October, bringing cooler weather and leaves that turned golden on the trees visible from their apartment window. Life had fallen into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were for Penny's piano lessons and schoolwork with Nancy, the retired teacher who came twice a week. Afternoons were filled with Rose's duties as resident assistant, organizing card games, helping with craft projects, or simply sitting with those who wanted company. But it was the music that had truly transformed their lives. What began as informal afternoon concerts had evolved into something more structured. Music Hour with Rose and Friends, as it was now called on the activity calendar, had become the most popular event at Sunshine. Residents who rarely left their rooms appeared for these sessions, and family visitors often timed their trips to coincide with the performances. "You've brought this place to life," Beth told Rose one morning as they reviewed the week's schedule. "I've never seen so many people in the community room at once." Rose smiled, still not entirely comfortable with the praise. "It's not just me. Dorothy plays beautifully, and Mrs. Baker has a lovely singing voice. Even Mr. Chen joined in with his harmonica yesterday. And don't forget Penny," Beth added. "Everyone loves watching her progress. She's learning so quickly." It was true. Penny had advanced beyond simple melodies to more complex pieces. Her small hands still struggled with some stretches, but her dedication was remarkable. Every day she practiced diligently, often with Dorothy offering guidance when Rose was busy with her duties. "There's something I wanted to discuss with you," Beth said, her tone becoming more serious. "The director of the Riverview School is visiting today. I mentioned Penny to her, and she's interested in meeting you both." Rose felt a flutter of anxiety. She had been worried about Penny's education, knowing that homeschooling with Nancy was only a temporary solution. But the thought of Penny going to a real school again? Would they be kind to her? Would they understand what she'd been through? "It's a good school," Beth continued, sensing Rose's concern. "Small classes, supportive teachers. And it's only 3 blocks away. Penny could walk there with the Henderson grandchildren. They go there too." "We don't have much money for tuition," Rose said quietly. Beth smiled. "That's the thing. They have a scholarship program, and the director is particularly interested in musically gifted students. They have a strong arts program." "Really?" Rose felt hope rising in her chest. "Do you think Penny might qualify?" "There's only one way to find out," Beth replied. "She'll be here at 1 o'clock. When Rose told Penny about the school director's visit, the girl's reaction was mixed. She was excited about the possibility of going to a real school again, making friends her own age, but also nervous about leaving the safe cocoon they had built at Sunshine. "Will I still have time to practice piano?" was her first question. "Of course you will," Rose assured her. "And you'll learn other things too, science and history and art." Penny nodded thoughtfully. "Can I play something for the school lady? To show her what I can do?" "I think that's a wonderful idea," Rose said, touched by her granddaughter's determination to put her best foot forward. At 1 o'clock, Mrs. Winters, the director of Riverview School, arrived. She was younger than Rose had expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and a warm smile that immediately put them at ease. "It's a pleasure to meet you both," Mrs. Winters said, shaking Rose's hand and then Penny's. "Beth has told me so much about you." They sat in a quiet corner of the community room, Penny swinging her legs nervously as the adults talked. Mrs. Winters asked about their background, gently, without prying, and about Penny's education before their difficult circumstances. "She was always a good student," Rose said proudly. "Even during our challenging time, she would read anything we could get from the library." Mrs. Winters nodded understandingly. "Children are remarkably resilient, but they need stability. It sounds like you've provided that for Penny, even in the hardest times." She turned to the girl. "Beth tells me you're quite the pianist, Penny. Would you like to show me what you can play?" Penny nodded eagerly, sliding off her chair and moving to the piano. Rose watched with a mixture of pride and nervousness as her granddaughter settled on the bench, took a deep breath, and began to play. She had chosen Bach's Minuet in G, a piece they had been working on for the past week. It wasn't perfect. There were a few hesitations, one wrong note, but the musicality was undeniable. Penny played with feeling, her face serious with concentration. When she finished, Mrs. Winters applauded enthusiastically. "That was lovely, Penny. How long have you been playing?" "Just since we came here," Penny answered shyly. "But Grandma's been teaching me every day." Mrs. Winters looked impressed. "You've learned all that in just 3 weeks? That's remarkable." She turned to Rose. "You must be an excellent teacher." "She makes it easy," Rose said, beaming at her granddaughter. "She has a natural talent." The conversation turned to Riverview School, its curriculum, its music program, the scholarship opportunity. As they talked, Penny relaxed, asking questions about what third grade would be like, whether there was a school choir, if they had a piano she could practice on during breaks. "We actually have several pianos," Mrs. Winters said. "And yes, there is a choir, as well as a beginner's orchestra for students who want to explore other instruments." By the end of the meeting, it was arranged that Penny would visit the school the following week, sit in on some classes, and meet the music teacher for an informal evaluation. If all went well, she could start after the fall break, with a partial scholarship covering most of the tuition. "Thank you so much for this opportunity," Rose said as they walked Mrs. Winters to the door. "It's we who should be thanking you," the director replied. "Talented, enthusiastic students like Penny make our school a better place." After Mrs. Winters left, Penny could barely contain her excitement. "Did you hear that, Grandma? They have an orchestra, and other kids who play music." "I heard," Rose said, hugging her granddaughter close. "I'm so proud of you." The news of Penny's potential enrollment at Riverview School spread quickly through Sunshine. Residents stopped Rose in the hallways to express their delight, though several admitted they would miss seeing the child around every day. "You'll still see me in the afternoons and weekends," Penny assured Mrs. Baker, when the elderly woman expressed this concern. "And I'll practice piano here every day after school." That evening, Dorothy invited Rose and Penny to dinner in her apartment. Unlike their small unit, Dorothy's was filled with elegant furniture and mementos from a long, well-traveled life. Photographs of London and Paris, delicate china teacups, shelves of books on music and art. "I wanted to celebrate Penny's good news," Dorothy explained, serving them homemade lasagna. "And to make you a proposition, Rose." "A proposition?" Rose asked, curious. Dorothy nodded, suddenly looking slightly nervous. "Beth mentioned that several residents have asked about piano lessons. Apparently your afternoon concerts have inspired them to learn. She wondered if you might consider teaching, but I know you're already busy with your assistant duties and Penny, so you thought you might teach instead," Rose guessed. "Actually," Dorothy said, "I thought perhaps we could teach together. Share the students. I haven't taught in decades, and I'm not sure I remember how to start with beginners. But if you were there..." The idea took root immediately in Rose's mind. Teaching again, not just Penny, but helping others discover or rediscover the joy of music, and doing it with Dorothy, who clearly had extensive training and experience to complement Rose's more informal approach. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Rose said warmly. "We could use the community room piano for lessons." Dorothy's face lit up. "Beth said we could charge a small fee. Nothing much, but enough to make it worth our while." "Can I help too?" Penny asked eagerly. "I could show people where to put their fingers like Grandma showed me." The adults laughed. "You'll be busy with school soon," Rose reminded her. "But perhaps on weekends you could be our demonstration student." The conversation flowed easily as they ate, moving from plans for the piano lessons to Dorothy's memories of studying music in London, to Penny's excitement about school. For dessert, Dorothy had baked an apple pie that made Penny's eyes widen with delight. "This reminds me of Grandpa's apple tree," she said as she took a bite. "Remember, Grandma? The one in our old backyard." Rose nodded, touched that Penny still remembered. "Your grandfather was so proud of that tree. He babied it like it was another child." "I miss him," Penny said simply. "And I miss Mom too." A brief shadow passed over the table at the mention of Penny's mother, Rose's daughter, who had died 2 years earlier. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it was gentler now, woven into the fabric of their lives rather than overwhelming it. "They would be very proud of you," Rose said softly, "especially today." Later, as they walked back to their apartment, Penny grew thoughtful. "Grandma, do you think we'll stay here forever now?" Rose considered the question carefully. "I don't know about forever, sweetheart, but I think we'll stay as long as we're needed and happy here." "I'm happy," Penny declared. "I like having friends again. And a piano." "Me too," Rose agreed. "It's more than I dared hope for a month ago." As they got ready for bed, Rose noticed Penny staring out their small window at the night sky. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I was just wondering," Penny said slowly, "if all the bad things hadn't happened, if we hadn't lost our house and had to stay at the train station, would we still have found the piano? And Dorothy? And this place?" The question caught Rose off guard. It was profoundly philosophical for a 7-year-old, touching on fate and silver linings and the strange, unpredictable paths that life sometimes takes. I don't know, she answered honestly. Life doesn't always make sense while we're living it. Sometimes it's only looking back that we can see how things fit together. Penny nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. I think maybe we were supposed to find that piano, she said decisively, because now we're helping other people be happy with music. Rose tucked her granddaughter into bed, marveling at the child's wisdom and resilience. Perhaps you're right, she said. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's another busy day. As Penny drifted off to sleep, Rose sat by the window looking out at the same stars her granddaughter had been contemplating. From homelessness to hope in just a few short weeks, from survival to purpose, from isolation to community, and all because of a piano in a train station and the courage to sit down and play. 2 months had passed since Penny started at Riverview School. December had arrived, bringing with it a light dusting of snow and holiday decorations throughout Sunshine Senior Living Center. Penny had thrived in her new school environment, making friends quickly and becoming a favorite of Mrs. Flynn, the music teacher who recognized her unusual talent. She has perfect pitch, Mrs. Flynn had told Rose during their first parent-teacher meeting. It's quite rare, especially in children her age. With proper training, she could go very far with music. Rose had nodded, proud but also slightly worried. Professional music training wasn't cheap, and despite their improved circumstances, money was still tight. The piano lessons she and Dorothy offered to residents brought in a small income, but most of it went toward Penny's school expenses not covered by her scholarship. We'll take it one step at a time, Rose had replied, a phrase that had become her mantra through all their ups and downs. On this particular Saturday morning, Rose woke to the sound of hushed voices in their small living room. Putting on her robe, she found Penny and Dorothy huddled over sheet music at their tiny dining table, speaking in excited whispers. What are you two plotting so early? Rose asked, smiling at the conspirators. Penny jumped up. Nothing. I mean, it's a surprise. For later. Dorothy looked slightly guilty. I came by early to help Penny with something. We didn't mean to wake you. You didn't, Rose assured them, heading to the kitchen to start coffee. But now I'm curious about this surprise. You'll see at the concert, Penny said mysteriously, gathering up the sheet music and hiding it behind her back. I have to get ready now. Mrs. Flynn is picking me up in an hour. Rose had almost forgotten. Today was the Riverview School Winter Concert, where Penny would be performing with the children's choir. It wasn't a major role. She'd only been at the school a short time, but she had been practicing diligently, excited to be part of something so special. After a quick breakfast, Penny changed into the outfit they had carefully selected for the concert, a simple blue dress with a white cardigan, both found at the second-hand store but looking nearly new. Rose braided her hair while Dorothy made helpful suggestions from the doorway. You look beautiful, Rose told her granddaughter when they were finished. Your mother would be so proud. Penny's face grew serious for a moment. Do you think she can see me wherever she is? Rose swallowed hard. I believe she can, sweetheart. I really do. A car horn honked outside, Mrs. Flynn right on time. Penny hugged Rose and Dorothy before rushing out, a bundle of excitement and nerves. Don't forget we're bringing a whole cheering section, Dorothy called after her. Indeed, 6 residents from Sunshine had signed up to attend the concert, all eager to support their youngest community member. With Penny gone, Rose turned to Dorothy. Now, are you going to tell me what the two of you were working on? Dorothy shook her head, eyes twinkling. Absolutely not. Patient is a virtue, my dear. That's patience, Rose corrected with a laugh. That too, Dorothy agreed, linking her arm through Rose's. Now come help me choose an appropriate concert outfit. I want to look respectable for our Penny's big day. The Riverview School auditorium was festively decorated with paper snowflakes and twinkling lights. Rose, Dorothy, and the small group of Sunshine residents took their seats near the front, where Rose had carefully reserved places. Mr. Chen had brought his camera to record the performance for those who couldn't attend. The room gradually filled with parents, grandparents, and siblings, the excited buzz of conversation growing louder. Rose felt a moment of worry. Would Penny be nervous with so many people watching? But her granddaughter had shown remarkable poise during their music hour performances at Sunshine, so perhaps stage fright wouldn't be an issue. The lights dimmed, and Mrs. Flynn stepped onto the stage to welcome everyone to the winter concert. We have a wonderful program for you today, she announced. Beginning with our youngest performers, the first and second grade classes, followed by our third and fourth grade choir, and concluding with some special solo performances. The concert began with the youngest children singing simple holiday songs, occasionally off-key but with such enthusiasm that the audience couldn't help but smile. Next came Penny's group, the third and fourth graders performing more complex pieces with harmonies. Rose spotted Penny immediately, standing in the second row, her face serious with concentration as she sang. "She's doing wonderfully," Dorothy whispered, squeezing Rose's hand. After the choir finished to enthusiastic applause, Mrs. Flynn returned to the microphone. "Now we have some special solo performances from students who have shown exceptional musical talent. First, we have a piano duet." Rose's eyebrows rose in surprise as Mrs. Flynn continued. "When Penny Thompson joined us just a few months ago, we discovered not just her own musical gifts, but an extraordinary story of resilience. Today, she would like to share that story through music, performing with her grandmother Rose, who taught her to play during some of their most difficult days." A murmur ran through the audience as Rose froze in her seat. This was the surprise. She hadn't prepared anything, hadn't practiced. Dorothy gave her a gentle nudge. "Go on," she whispered. "Penny's been planning this for weeks. The piece is one you know by heart." In a daze, Rose stood and made her way to the stage where Penny was already waiting by the grand piano, beaming with excitement. "Surprise, Grandma," she whispered as Rose joined her on the bench. "What are we playing?" Rose asked, her heart racing with a mixture of nervousness and emotion. "Heart and Soul," Penny replied. "But the real version, the harder one we've been practicing? I'll take the melody like we do at home." Mrs. Flynn leaned into the microphone one more time. "Before they begin, Penny would like to say a few words." Penny stepped up to the microphone, looking suddenly very grown up despite her small stature. "My grandma and I were homeless a few months ago," she said clearly without shame or embarrassment. "We had nowhere to go, but we found a piano in a train station, and Grandma started teaching me to play. Now we have a home and I go to school here, and it's all because of music. So this song is for anyone who's having a hard time right now. Things can get better. You just have to keep playing." There was a moment of silence, then spontaneous applause broke out. Rose felt tears stinging her eyes as Penny rejoined her at the piano. Her granddaughter's simple honesty, her courage in sharing their story, it was overwhelming. "Ready, Grandma?" Penny whispered. Rose nodded, placing her hands on the keys. They began to play, Rose providing the bass pattern while Penny played the more complex melody. The piece was Hoagie Carmichael's original Heart and Soul, not the simplified version most people knew, and it required real skill to perform properly. As they played, Rose felt something extraordinary happening in the room. The audience had gone completely still, all eyes fixed on the unlikely duo at the piano, an 87-year-old grandmother and her 7-year-old granddaughter, both playing with expressions of pure joy on their faces. The music swelled, telling their story more eloquently than words could. The struggle, the bond between them, the healing power of music, and the journey from desperation to hope. When they reached the final notes, there was a breathless pause before the audience erupted into applause. People began to stand, first a few, then entire rows until everyone in the auditorium was on their feet. Rose looked out at the sea of faces and saw something she hadn't expected: tears. Parents were wiping their eyes. Teachers were dabbing at their cheeks with tissues. Even the principal, a stern-looking man who had greeted them briefly before the show, was clearing his throat and blinking rapidly. But it was the faces of their Sunshine family that touched her most. Dorothy, Mr. Chen, Mrs. Baker, and the others, all standing and applauding with such pride and love on their faces. These people, who had been strangers just months ago, were now as dear to her as family. Penny tugged at her sleeve, and they stood together to take a bow. As they made their way back to their seats, people reached out to touch Rose's arm, to offer words of congratulations or simply a warm smile. "That was incredible," Dorothy said, hugging them both when they returned. "You've touched so many hearts today." The rest of the concert passed in a blur. Other children performed their solos, all talented and well-prepared, but there was a special energy in the room now, a sense of connection that hadn't been there before. After the final performance, as people mingled in the auditorium, a man in a suit approached them. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Richard Walker from the City Arts Foundation. Rose recognized the name from the plaque on the train station. Piano, the organization that had donated it. Your granddaughter's introduction caught my attention, he continued. Was it really our piano at Central Station where you two played? Rose nodded. It was. That piano changed our lives. Mr. Walker smiled. I'm glad to hear it. That's exactly why we place pianos in public spaces, to bring music to unexpected places. He handed Rose a business card. We're starting a new program to provide music lessons to children who can't afford them. We're looking for teachers with real-life experience, not just academic credentials. Would you be interested in discussing this further? Before Rose could answer, the principal joined them. Mrs. Thompson, you and Penny created quite a stir today. We've had 3 parents ask if you offer private piano lessons. He glanced at Mr. Walker. I see Richard has already found you. The City Arts Foundation has been a wonderful partner to our school. Is this for real? Rose asked, feeling slightly overwhelmed. Very real, Mr. Walker assured her. And there's something else. We're hosting a benefit concert next month at the Grand Theater downtown. Would you and Penny consider performing? Your story and your music could help us raise funds to bring music education to more children in need. Later that evening, back at Sunshine, an impromptu celebration gathered in the community room. Word of Penny and Rose's standing ovation had spread quickly, and residents wanted to hear all about it. Mr. Chen had already downloaded the video he'd taken and was showing it on his tablet to anyone who hadn't attended. So what did you tell that Arts Foundation man? Mrs. Baker asked as she poured Rose a cup of tea. I said we'd be honored to participate, Rose replied. It's a chance to give back, to help other children find what Penny found through music. Dorothy raised her teacup in a toast. To Rose and Penny, from the train station to the Grand Theater. What an extraordinary journey. As the others echoed the toast, Penny slipped her small hand into Rose's. We did it, Grandma, she whispered. We didn't give up. Rose squeezed her granddaughter's hand, thinking of the months of hardship they had endured, the nights spent on hard benches, the uncertainty and fear. No, we didn't give up. And look at us now. Across the room, someone had started playing the piano, Mr. Chen, attempting a halting version of Heart and Soul, the simple duet version that beginners learned. Mrs. Baker joined him, and soon others gathered around the instrument, taking turns, laughing at their mistakes, celebrating small successes. Rose watched them with a full heart, from one piano in a train station to dozens of lives touched by music, from homelessness to purpose, from despair to joy. Come on, Grandma, Penny said, tugging her toward the piano. They need help. Let's show them how it's done. Hand in hand, grandmother and granddaughter moved toward the circle of friends, ready to share their gift once more. No one watching could hold back tears, tears not of sorrow, but of recognition of the beautiful truth that even in our darkest moments, hope can find us often in the most unexpected places. Now, Moonlight Sonata? It was my husband's favorite. Rose smiled. I do indeed. For the next half hour, Rose played request after request. The stiffness in her fingers seemed to melt away with each piece. Penny sat beside her on the bench, watching in wonder as the residents sang along or tapped their feet or simply closed their eyes in appreciation. Later, as Beth showed them the small but clean one-bedroom apartment that could be theirs, Penny tugged on Rose's sleeve. Grandma, she whispered, I think we found our home. Looking down at her granddaughter's hopeful face, Rose felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of possibility, of purpose. Maybe, just maybe, this was their second chance. When could we start? She asked Beth. Beth smiled warmly. How about tomorrow? We have some paperwork to fill out, of course, but the apartment is ready now if you want it. Rose took Penny's hand in hers and squeezed it gently. Yes, she said, her voice steady and sure. We'd like that very much.